Good Sunday evening, everybody, and happy spooky season, October 1st. Tonight, I'm kind of like behind on one video, so I decided to film my big one, and then tomorrow I officially kick off my spooky season October month. So I want to get this video out of the way because it's going to be a long one, but these are going to be the 28 movies I watched in September, and I got quite a physical load here. Help. So, this month, I rewatched the Saw series and the Expendables series, a few MCU movies, and I also continued with my horror project. And there are also like a couple of new release horror movies that came out this month. So, without making this video way too long, let's go ahead and get started with, grab my notebook. The first movie I officially watched this month was part of my horror project. That movie was Let Me In, 2010, and this is the American remake of Let the Right One In, which is like a Swedish vampire novel, but it's also like a love story. So it's about like these two kids forming a relationship, and the girl is actually a vampire. I really did enjoy this movie quite a bit, and I have the majority of these movies reviewed on my channel, so quite a bit that I did in September. So if you want to watch all those reviews before watching this, have fun. But this was a very solid vampire movie. That was Let Me In. The next movie I watched was The Equalizer 3. And this was the first new release of the month, and it came out Labor Day weekend. I just saw this one, but I didn't watch the other two. So I'm missing the other two as reviews, but I was out of town that weekend, so I didn't have time to do that. But anyway, the Equalizer 3 takes us to Italy, where Denzel Washington is exacting revenge on the mafia from dealing drugs. This was a very solid movie, but to me, it was very slow. But once it picked up, it had some really great action scenes in it. I mean, it's not going to really stand out this year, but I thought it was decent enough. That was The Equalizer 3. And now, moving on to my physical pile. And the first movie I want to pick up from that pile is going to be Saw. And I now have a review for all 10 movies on my channel, so I won't spend too much time on these. So, Saw was released in 2004, and it stars the likes of Cary Elwes, Lee Winnell, Danny Glover, Tobin Bell, and Shawnee Smith. So, Jigsaw was a serial killer who designed all these traps for his victims to either live or die. The first trap in here is the bathroom trap. And Some very gnarly traps in here are the reverse bear trap and many others. So, like I said, I'm not going to spend too much time on these movies. You'll get my full review. This is a very solid horror classic that's modern, and I think it will be included in my top 50 horror movies when I make that video later this month. So that was Saw. So naturally, I moved on to Saw 2, and this movie went deeper into the mythology of the game because it added more characters and the story was a little bit more interesting. So, more traps, more blood, more gore. So, I really do enjoy this movie quite a bit. And it is the movie before the last movie that was good in this series, before Saw X. So this is a very solid one. That was Saw 2. And then I started phase 3 of the MCU with Captain America Civil War, and this takes place after the events of Age of Ultron, where the Avengers were accused of murdering people in Sokovia, and Iron Man and Captain America both form their own teams against each other. I've always really enjoyed this movie quite a bit. Not only you get the introduction of Black Panther and Spider-Man in here, it's easily one of the best MCU movies to date. So, I really did enjoy this movie quite a bit. That was Captain America Civil War. And again, I don't have any singular reviews on the MCU, so way too much there. I had more of a priority with some of these other movies. But moving on, the next movie I watched was The Nun. And this was released in 2018, and it is a Conjuring Spin-Off. So it's about like this girl who is studying to become a nun. She has to go to this abbey in Romania, and she has to find out that this place is really cursed, which it is, because Valak was the demonic entity that becomes a nun and terrorizes this abbey. This movie, really, really boring when I first saw it, but I kind of actually enjoyed it the second time I watched it. It's not a favorite, but it's a little bit better than people are saying it was. So that was The Nun, followed by The Nun 2, and this took place like 4 years after the original, and the story is more interesting, and this is kind of like set up like a slasher in a way, because it's primarily set at this girls' boarding school in France, and this movie was significantly better than the original. Again, I have a full review for both of these movies on the channel, so check it out if you're interested. That was The Nun 2. Followed by the next movie in my horror project. And this is going to shock a lot of people, because I really don't see this as a horror movie, but it's more of like a horror comedy. Tucker and Dale versus Evil. And I rewatched this again because I rewatched this earlier this year, I believe, but I picked this movie especially for my horror project because horror comedies do count, and this is a good one. So this tells a story of two redneck hillbillies who look suspicious as hell, but there's a group of college students that vacation in the woods, and they think that these hillbillies are psychopaths. Turns out they're not psychopaths, but the college students are. And you have like over the top gore in here, and all the deaths are hilarious. This is truly a hilarious horror comedy classic. And I gushed and raved about this movie on my channel, so that was a really fun video. Check it out. That was Tucker and Dale versus Evil, followed by Saw 3. That was before Tucker and Dale versus Evil. So, Saw 3 was the last decent Saw movie, and then the whole franchise derailed, in my opinion. So, the test in here features like a man who lost his son to like a drunk driver, and he is forced to either let live or die the people involved in his case. The traps in here are very messed up, especially the rack, and then you got like the pig trough trap, which is definitely one of the grossest traps in Saw. So, another decent setup, and this is the last movie where you see John Kramer and Amanda alive. So, a very good one, but this is where Saw like had its popularity, and then it just crashed and burned. So that was Saw 3. Okay, moving on to Doctor Strange. And I've always enjoyed this movie quite a bit, and it's like the MCU meets Inception. So Stephen Strange is like a surgeon, and he gets into a horrific car accident, and he loses the movement to his hands, and he's forced to go to Comertage to get healed. But he also develops the powers of the Sorcerer Supreme. And your villain in here is Caecilius, played by Mads Mikkelsen. This movie is awesome, and I really enjoy it quite a bit. That was Doctor Strange. Followed by Saw 4. And this is the movie where you see the decline in Saw. To me, the test in here is not memorable, and the guy who's doing it is the most unfascinating character in this franchise. So this one was fine, but I think it's like near the bottom for me. That was Saw 4. Followed by yet another rewatch of Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2. And I reviewed this trilogy earlier this year in May when the third one came out, so you know my full thoughts on here, but your villain is Ego, played by Kurt Russell, and to me, this is probably the most underrated MCU sequel. There, I said it. More action and more laughs and a better villain, in my opinion. So that was Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2. Followed by Saw 5. And the trap in here that like really stands out is in the beginning with the pit and the pendulum. So Hoffman exacts revenge on this guy who murdered his sister, and he pretty much makes these traps just to kill people. So none of the suspense is really all that in these 4 movies with Hoffman, and the pursuit of Hoffman and Strom is kind of boring in a way, but Strom was kind of an idiot because he didn't get into like that glass cage and survived, so he got crushed. So Hoffman is kind of like a snake that escapes everything. Saw 5, that's pretty much all I can say. Followed by The Faculty. And this was my next pick in my horror project. And you might not think that this is really a horror movie because it's more like a sci-fi movie. But it is basically Robert Rodriguez's vision on Invasion of the Body Snatchers with teenagers. So some alien parasite takes over a school in Ohio, and you're left with surviving few that try to stop this alien invader. Very good sci-fi horror movie with a stacked cast. Like Elijah Wood, Jordana Brewster, Usher, Josh Hartnett, Piper Laurie, Christopher McDonald, Robert Patrick, Jon Stewart, and Clea Duvall, and even John Abrahams is in this movie. So I really love this movie, and I really wanted to watch it for my horror project. That was The Faculty. I'm halfway through. I still have 14 movies to go. The next one I watched was A Haunting and Venice. And this is an Agatha Christie murder mystery based on Halloween Party. So this is her story with the most horror in it. But that's what disappointed me. This was not a supernatural movie at all. Because Hercule Poirot was kind of like hallucinating all this stuff in this house, and he's trying to like solve this mystery. So this movie was fine. I'm just not that big of a murder mystery fan, but it was watchable. That was A Haunting and Venice. Next up is actually one of the better Saw sequels, Saw 6. And this one is a little bit more cohesive, and it focuses on this insurance agent who denied people health coverage. So he has to determine who lives and who dies with the people he works with. The trap that really stands out in this one is the shotgun carousel. That is one of the most brutal traps in the Hoffman era of Saw. And I actually really do enjoy this one quite a bit. So, Saw 6. Followed by Saw 3D or Saw the Final Chapter. This one, I think, might be the worst one. Because the 3D gimmick was a little bit too much, and this movie just looked cheap. The gore was non-existent because it was mostly CGI, and you just saw pink blood. I just got a notification from Watch Mojo about a Saw video. But anyway, there's a trap in here that involves Chester Bennington of Lincoln Park. It's probably one of the most notable traps in this movie. So that features like him and 3 of his friends. He has to remove his skin and pull a lever from the front seat of the car to like not let people get their head crushed, arms ripped off, rammed into a garage door, and Chester Bennington getting ejected. That was a pretty interesting trap, to say the least. So, this movie was... that was Saw 3D. Next up is Spider-Man Homecoming, and unfortunately, this was the last MCU movie I watched this month. I took a break during these last couple weeks in September and just started Creepshow. But anyway, this is the first solo movie with MCU Spidey, and the villain in here is Vulture, played by Michael Keaton, which was part of the Avengers cleanup. And he's just a good working guy who's just cleaning up the city, but he gets greedy with Chitauri weaponry, and he becomes the Vulture. So I really do enjoy the companionship with Spider-Man and Iron Man in here. And to think Iron Man gets it here in the next 2 years after this in Endgame. So this was definitely like a father figure to Spider-Man. I really do enjoy this movie quite a bit. So that was Spider-Man Homecoming. And I really hope to continue on with the MCU in October. I'm very behind, so I need to get through 3 phases. The rest of phase 3, 4, and 5. So, wish me luck there. But it's October. I'd rather watch horror movies, so this whole MCU project is still up in the air. I'll try my best, but when I do that ultimate ranking, most of it will be from memory. I guarantee it. Ugh. So, yeah. Moving on, I have Jigsaw. And this is the 8th entry. And this works as like a standalone, because it's kind of like a soft reboot. And this takes place 10 years before Jigsaw died. You get that twist at the end, and this just features like a group of people playing certain games and they try to fight to survive. Nothing special here, except that this movie is on the cusp of shouldn't have existed. That was Jigsaw. Followed by Spiral from the Book of Saw. And this movie was released 2 years ago. This features Chris Rock and Samuel L. Jackson in the movie. And Chris Rock is like a detective who finds out about like the new Jigsaw killings. This movie is very decent, and I do enjoy the creative liberty that Chris Rock had with it. So, another solid Saw sequel, Spiral. And that was the first 9 Saw movies. Moving on, I have The Expendables, and this is your dream team of action stars as ragtag mercenaries trying to save South America from the drug trade. I really do enjoy this movie quite a bit. It has the likes of Sylvester Stallone, Jason Statham, Jet Li, Stone Cold Steve Austin, Dolph Lundgren, Mickey Rourke, Bruce Willis, Eric Roberts, and many, many more. So, definitely a great action film. Full review on the channel. Followed by the sequel, and this takes place in like Europe, and the villain is Jean-Claude Van Damme, and he's in charge of plutonium mining. The story is fine, but it's not very memorable. That was The Expendables 2. I'm just gonna blow through these, so I'm almost done. Next one is the final movie I watched for my horror project this month, September, From Dusk Till Dawn. And rewatching this was really, really fun. What can I say? Vampire strippers and Tom Savini as Sex Machine. That is all you need. So, a very underrated vampire horror classic that should definitely be seen at least once by every horror enthusiast. From Dusk Till Dawn. Followed by The Expendables 3, and the villain in here is Mel Gibson. And believe it or not, though this movie is PG-13, it's my second favorite. Mel Gibson is just having the time of his life in this movie, and I really enjoy his character. So, that was The Expendables 3. I finished my physical pile. But I'm not done yet. I have 4 more movies to talk about, so let's get them going. The next movie might have been my least favorite that I saw this month. It Lives Inside. So, this is a new Indian folk horror movie about like this demonic entity called Pashash, which is like a soul eater, and it features 2 girls trying to vanquish the evil. This movie was very generic and very forgettable. Next one was Expendables or Expendables 4. Unfortunately, this one did not work for me whatsoever. The story is so dull, and you have people in here that you don't even know, unless if you're a bigger action fan. But you also have the inclusion of Megan Fox in here, which was a weird decision. But you're missing like half of the original Expendables in this movie. So, this is probably where Sylvester Stallone didn't really want to be in this movie, because something specific happens to him. But he does come back. I can watch this, but it is easily the weakest of the Expendables. So, that was The Expendables 4. Next, Dracula 2000. And I watched this at the beginning of last week, and I was very empty that week because I only got one more movie to talk about after this movie. So, Dracula 2000 was a childhood favorite of mine, and it just tells like a modern retelling of Bram Stoker's Dracula. I know this movie is so cheesy and so 2000s, but I gotta say that I had a blast with it. Gerard Butler was pretty dope as Dracula, and he even added in the element of the Brides of Dracula. I really did enjoy this movie quite a bit. So that was Dracula 2000. And finally, the last movie I've watched was easily the best new release movie of the month. Saw X. Yep, you heard me right. Saw X was the best new release this month. And this was the exact Saw movie every fan wanted, because this movie is primarily set around John Kramer and his origins. So this is a prequel set between Saw 1 and 2. So he tries to find treatment for his cancer, and he does. but the doctors and nurses are con artists and they are the victims of his game. This movie, you sympathize with Jigsaw because these people are the lowest of the low and you want them to die. So, this movie did Don't Breathe 2 better. And there were like a couple of emotional scenes in here. So, really did enjoy this movie. And that wraps up the 28 movies I watched in September. I didn't do too bad. So, a very decent mix of movies this month. And October is just going to get more horror and other stuff in between. So I definitely can't wait for this month. I actually watched my first movie tonight, and that was The Mummy. So that was a fun one. But I mean, that's all I got for this video. And tomorrow I officially kick off spooky season. So I'm probably going to film my Saw ranking and then do my October TBR. So those are two I have in mind, but I losing my voice. Okay, I'm back. I also have like a horror recommendations. I'm going to have a reading of The Raven. I'm going to do an Exorcist review, an Exorcist Believer review, and popular horror books I want to read soon. And I might also have another video planned as well. So stay tuned for this week. I'll have a lot of videos to film for you guys, and I can't wait to start it off tomorrow. So sleep well, and I'll see you guys tomorrow with my October TBR and my Saw ranking. Adios.